The fluorescent lights of the courtroom burst overhead, a dull counterpoint to the frantic drumming of my heart. My father, Harold Parker, sat stiffly beside his lawyer, his face a mask of disapproval. He hadn't looked at me once since I'd entered the room. Order. Order in the court. The bailiff barked, his voice echoing through the otherwise silent chamber. I smoothed down the skirt of my simple black dress, a stark contrast to the flamboyant colors I usually favored in my artwork. This wasn't a place for self-expression. It was a battlefield. All rise, the bailiff droned, and everyone stood as Judge Murray entered. I felt the bead of sweat trickle down my spine. This was it, the culmination of months of planning, of meticulously gathering evidence, of wrestling with my own conscience. Be seated, Judge Mallory instructed. Her voice crisp and authoritative, she settled into her chair, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom, landing momentarily on me. I straightened in my seat, determined to meet her gaze without flinching. My lawyer, Ms. Ramirez, a formidable woman with steel grey hair and piercing blue eyes, leaned towards me. Ready, she whispered, her voice low and reassuring. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. Ready. This wasn't just about the fire. Her laughter at the news of a fire is the start of something big. Oh, the fire itself was real enough. It had ripped through my apartment building, leaving nothing but charred wreckage and shattered lives. But for me, it had been a strange sort of liberation. My apartment had been filled with the suffocating weight of my father's expectations, the accounting textbooks he'd insisted I study, the business suits he bought me, the constant reminders of the stable career he wanted for me. All gone, reduced to ashes. Ms. Ramirez, Judge Mallory addressed my lawyer. You may proceed with your opening statement. Ms. Ramirez rose, her movements precise and deliberate. Your Honor, members of the jury, she began, her voice clear and resonant. We are here today because of a tragic event, a fire that destroyed everything that does it. A fire that, ironically, illuminated a far more insidious destruction, the systematic dismantling of a young woman's dreams by her own father. She paused, letting her words hang in the air. I saw my father shift uncomfortably in his seat. He knew where this was going. My client, Audrey Parker, Ms. Ramirez continued, gesturing towards me, is a talented artist, a visionary, a young woman with a passion for creating beauty in a world that often seems determined to extinguish it. Objection. My father's lawyer, a slick, expensively dressed man named Mr. Caldwell, boomed. This is irrelevant. This case is about an insurance claim, not about Ms. Parker's artistic aspirations. Your Honor, Ms. Ramirez countered smoothly. I intend to demonstrate that Mr. Parker's actions directly contributed to the emotional distress suffered by my client, distress that was exacerbated by the fire. Judge Murray considered for a moment. Objection overruled. You may continue, Ms. Ramirez. A small flicker of hope ignited within me. This was good. This was going according to plan. Ms. Ramirez turned back to the jury. Mr. Parker, she said, her voice dripping with controlled disdain, has consistently undermined his daughter's artistic pursuits. He has belittled her talent, discouraged her ambition, and actively sought to sabotage her career. He believed her art was frivolous, a childish pursuit unworthy of his time or attention. I could feel my father's eyes boring into me, but I refused to look at him. I kept my gaze fixed on Ms. Ramirez, drawing strength from her unwavering confidence. He even went so far as to threaten to disinherit her. Ms. Ramirez continued, her voice rising slightly, if she didn't abandon her foolish dreams and pursue a career in business, a career he deemed more suitable for a Parker. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I saw a few jurors exchange glances, This was hitting them. They were seeing the truth behind the carefully crafted facade my father had presented to the world for so long. Ms. Ramirez and described the fire, the devastating loss of my apartment and all its contents. But amidst the ashes, she said, her voice softening, something remarkable happened. Ms. Parker's artwork, the very thing her father had so vehemently disparaged, was miraculously spared. It had been stored off-site, in preparation for an exhibition that Mr. Parker had tried to prevent. She paused again, letting the irony sink in. The fire that sparked her success, she said, her voice ringing with conviction, the fire that destroyed her physical possessions, but liberated her from the oppressive weight of her father's expectations. I finally allowed myself to glance at my father. His face was flushed, his jaw clenched tight. He looked defeated. This case, Your Honor, members of the jury, Ms. Ramirez concluded, is about more than just an insurance claim. It is about a daughter's fight for recognition, for validation, for the right to pursue her own dreams, free from the suffocating control of a father who sought to dictate her destiny. The courtroom was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I took a deep breath, the weight of years of resentment and frustration beginning to lift. This was just the beginning. I had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was finally telling my story, and I wasn't going to be silenced. The biting New York wind whipped around me, a cruel parody of a welcoming embrace. My breath puffed out in white clouds, disappearing into the grey sky just as quickly as my hopes seemed to be. I clutched my warm portfolio tighter, the edges softened and frayed from countless gallery visits that always are ended with a polite but firm rejection. Interesting. Not quite what we're looking for, they'd say, their eyes already flitting to the next hopeful face. Just keep trying, I muttered to myself, the words echoing hollowly in the cavernous space between the skyscrapers. Easy to say when you weren't the one living off instant ramen and sharing a cramped apartment with a roommate whose snoring could rival a freight train. My stomach growled, a painful reminder of my meager budget. Maybe just one slice, I thought, eyeing the steaming pizza stand on the corner. A $1 slice wouldn't break the bank, would it? Audrey, is that you? The voice was sharp, edged with a surprise that bordered on disapproval. I turned to see my sister, Emily Parker, stepping out of a sleek black car. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored business suit, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. Everything about her screamed success, the kind of success my father craved. Emily, what are you doing here? I asked, suddenly self-conscious of my paint-spattered jeans and worn-out sneakers. Shopping, she said, holding up a glossy shopping bag. Just picking up a few things. How I scanned my outfit, a flicker of judgment passing through them. You look busy. Trying to be, I replied, forcing a smile. Just came from another gallery. Oh, right, she said, the tone suggesting she'd forgotten all about my artistic aspirations. Still chasing that dream? The question stung more than she could know. It's not chasing, I retorted, a defensiveness creeping into my voice. It's working. It's my life. Emily sighed, the kind of sigh reserved for exasperating children. Dad's worried about you, you know, she said. He keeps asking when you're going to get a real job. A familiar knot tightened in my stomach. My father's disappointment was a constant weight, a heavy shadow that followed me everywhere. Tell him I'm working on it, I mumbled, my gaze dropping to the pavement. He offered to pay for you to go back to school, Emily continued, opening the car door. Get a business degree. Something practical. I shook my head, a wave of frustration washing over me. That's not me, Emily. You know that. He just wants what's best for you, she said, her voice softening slightly. He worries about you starving in a garret somewhere. I'm not going to starve, I said, my voice rising with each word. I'm going to make it. I'm going to be a successful artist. Emily's expression was a mixture of pity and impatience. Audrey, she started. Then a man in a chauffeur's uniform held the car door open wider. Look. I have to go. Think about what Dad said. Okay. For your own good, she slid into the luxurious leather seat, the scent of expensive perfume wafting out. Good luck with your art, she added, the words tinged with skepticism. The car pulled away, leaving me standing on the crowded sidewalk, the wind swirling around me. I felt the lump forming in my throat, threatening to spill over into tears. I wanted to scream, to shout at the retreating car, to tell Emily and my father that they were wrong, that I would prove them wrong. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I turned back towards the subway, the rumble of the trains a low, constant hum beneath the city's roar. One slice, I muttered to myself, the promise of warm, cheesy goodness, a small consolation in the face of overwhelming doubt. As I walked, my mind drifted back to a memory, sharp and vivid, of a family dinner a few years earlier. We were celebrating Emily's graduation from business school, a lavish affair held at my father's favorite steakhouse. The air was thick with the aroma of grilled meat and expensive wine. Laughter and congratulations filled the room. My father beamed with pride as he presented Emily with a brand new car, a gleaming symbol of her success. "This is for all your hard work," he'd said, his voice choked with emotion. "You've made us so proud." I, on the other hand, had just been accepted into a prestigious art program in New York. I'd nervously presented my father with a small, framed painting, a cityscape bathed in the warm glow of sunset. He'd taken it, his face unreadable. He'd studied it for a moment, then set it down on the table without a word. "That's nice, Audrey," he'd said, his voice flat, devoid of any enthusiasm. He'd then turned back to Emily, resuming his praise for her academic achievements. The memory stung. A fresh wound opened anew. The car, the praise, the blatant favoritism, it was a recurring theme throughout my childhood. Emily, the practical one, the one who followed the prescribed path, was always showered with attention and approval. I, the artist, the dreamer, was always relegated to the sidelines, my passions dismissed as frivolous pursuits. "It's not fair," I whispered to myself, the wind snatching the words away. The unfairness of it all burned in my chest, a fiery ember fueling my determination. "I'll show them," I thought, clenching my fists. "I'll show them all." The pizza stand came into view, a beacon of warmth and comfort in the cold, indifferent city. I reached into my pocket, counting out the crumpled dollar bills. Even a single slice could be a celebration, a small act of defiance in the face of adversity. I would eat this slice. I would finish my portfolio, and I would conquer this city, one gallery at a time. They would see. They would all see. My art wasn't just a dream. It was a fire, burning brighter with every rejection, every dismissive comment, every act of favoritism. And that fire, I knew, would one day illuminate the world. The ultimate ironic twist of fate would be that they would beg to be a part of my world then. The chipped paint on the windowsill didn't bother me. Neither did the slightly crooked floorboards that creaked when I walked across them. This place, this small, top-floor apartment with its sloping ceilings and enormous skylight, felt like a sanctuary. "It's perfect, Julian," I said, turning to him, a grin plastered across my face. Julian, ever the pragmatist, was scrutinizing the peeling wallpaper. He ran a hand along it, a thoughtful frown etched on his face. "Are you sure, Audrey? It needs a lot of work." "That's part of the charm," I countered, already envisioning my easel beneath the skylight, bathed in the warm glow of the afternoon sun. "Think of the light, Julian. It's incredible. I can finally have a proper studio space." He chuckled, shaking his head. You and your art, he said, but there was a fondness in his voice, always chasing the light. It's my lifeblood, I replied, walking over to the window and gazing out at the bustling city below. This view, this space. It was a dream come true. After years of cramped studios and battling for space in our tiny apartment, I finally had a place where I could truly create. And the rent is manageable? Julian asked, his voice laced with concern. He knew how tight money was, how much I struggled to make ends meet while pursuing my passion. Surprisingly so, I said, a wave of relief washing over me. The landlord is an old artist himself. He appreciates the struggle. I could still picture the kind, wrinkled face of Mr. Henderson, his eyes twinkling as he showed me around. He understood the magnetic pull of art, the sacrifices one makes. He even offered to let me pay part of the rent with paintings. Julian raised an eyebrow. That's unconventional. But brilliant, I interjected, my excitement bubbling up. It means I can focus on painting instead of constantly worrying about money. That initial joy, that exhilarating sense of freedom and possibility, was so sharp in my memory. It was the feeling of finally having a space to call my own, a place where my art could flourish. I spent weeks transforming the apartment, patching the walls, painting them a calming shade of seafoam green, and scrubbing the grime off the old wooden floors. Every brush stroke, every nail hammered in, was an act of love, a testament to my dedication. The skylight became my muse. I'd wake up with the sunrise, its golden rays spilling across my canvas, and paint until the last vestiges of daylight faded. I was prolific, energized by the space, the light, the sheer possibility of it all. My paintings, vibrant and full of life, reflected the joy I felt. This place has changed you, Audrey, Julian remarked one evening, watching me as I sketched in my notebook. You're glowing, I smiled, my heart full. I feel like I can finally breathe, I confessed. Like I can finally be myself. The first few months in the apartment were pure bliss. I produced a body of work I was incredibly proud of. Paintings that pulsed with energy and emotion. Mr. Henderson, true to his word, accepted several of my pieces as payment for rent, his admiration evident in his kind eyes. I was finally on the right path, finally making progress towards my dream. Then, the betrayal came. It was slow, insidious, like a poison seeping into my newfound paradise. It started subtly, with Julian making comments about my messy studio, my unconventional landlord, my obsessive focus on my art. Don't you think you should maybe branch out a bit? He suggested one evening, as I was preparing my canvases for a new series. Maybe try something more commercial. Commercial, I repeated, a knot forming in my stomach. My art isn't about being commercial, Julian. It's about expression, about capturing emotion. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I just think you should be more practical, he said, his voice tight. Think about your future, Audrey. Art is a risky business. His words stung. I had thought he understood me, supported my passion. But his increasing disapproval chipped away at my confidence. Like rain eroding a sandcastle, he started spending less and less time at the apartment, making excuses about work, about needing space. The silence in the apartment, once a comforting blanket, now felt heavy, suffocating. Then came the final blow. I was working late one night, lost in a frenzy of creativity, when Julian walked in, his face grim. He held a crumpled piece of paper in his hand. What's that? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. He hesitated, avoiding my gaze. It's an eviction notice, he mumbled, finally meeting my eyes. Mr. Henderson, he's selling the building. My world tilted. Selling the building. I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. But he promised apparently. He got a good offer. Julian said, his tone flat. He said he needs the money. I stared at him, disbelief swirling inside me. Mr. Henderson, the kind old artist who understood my struggles, who had given me this sanctuary, he had betrayed me. The eviction notice trembled in my hand, the words blurring into meaningless ink. All that work, all that hope, all that joy, it was gone, snatched away in an instant. The fire that had sparked my success, the very apartment that had nurtured my creativity, had now become the source of my devastation, the ultimate ironic twist of fate. I don't understand, I stammered, tears welling up in my eyes. He promised. Julian pulled me into a hug, his arms tight around me. I know, Audrey, he murmured, his voice laced with something I couldn't quite decipher. I know. But even in his embrace, I felt the coldness, a distance that I couldn't ignore. Later, much later, I would understand the true meaning of that coldness, the true extent of his betrayal. But in that moment, all I felt was the crushing weight of loss, the shattering realization that my dream had turned into a nightmare. The fire that had been my inspiration had now turned on me, consuming everything I had built. The stale air of the courtroom pressed down on me, heavy with anticipation. My lawyer, Ms. Diaz, squeezed my hand reassuringly. Just a few more minutes, Audrey. You've got this. I nodded, trying to project an air of confidence I didn't quite feel. My father, Richard Parker, sat across the aisle, his face a mask of stony indifference. He hadn't even glanced at me since I entered the courtroom. This whole ordeal, this lawsuit against my father and his shady business partner, Mr. Vasquez, felt surreal. Was it an accident or was it something more sinister? That was the question hanging over us all. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Thompson entered, her expression severe. The trial had been dragging on for weeks, each day a slow, agonizing drip of testimony and cross-examination. But today felt different. Today, I had a secret weapon, Ms. Parker. Judge Thompson addressed me. Are you ready to continue your testimony? Yes, Your Honor. My voice, though slightly shaky, was firm. Very well. Please proceed. I took a deep breath, my gaze sweeping across the faces in the courtroom, my father's impassive stare, Julian's supportive smile, Ms. Diaz's encouraging nod, and the curious gazes of the jury. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce a new piece of evidence. Ms. Diaz approached the bench, handing a sealed envelope to Judge Thompson. My heart hammered against my ribs. Everything hinged on this. The judge carefully opened the envelope, her eyebrows raising as she scanned the contents. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. This appears to be a series of emails, Judge Thompson stated, looking at Mr. Vasquez, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mr. Vasquez, can you identify these emails, Mr. Vasquez stammered. Your Honor, I need to review them more closely. You shall have that opportunity. The judge replied dryly. She turned to me, Ms. Parker. Please explain how you obtained these emails. This was it. The moment of truth. Your Honor, I began. After the fire, I was naturally devastated. But as I started to piece together the events leading up to it, I noticed some irregularities. I paused, letting the suspense build. The building had been experiencing a number of problems in the weeks prior: faulty wiring, a gas leak, a malfunctioning fire alarm system. I glanced at Mr. Vasquez, who was now sweating profusely. I found Mr. Vasquez's responses to my concerns evasive. He kept assuring me everything was under control, but his assurances fell hollow. Something felt off. So what did you do, Ms. Diaz prompted gently. I started asking other tenants in the building, I replied, and I discovered I wasn't alone in my concerns. Several other tenants had also reported problems to Mr. Vasquez, but he had dismissed their complaints. Did you document these conversations? Ms. Diaz asked. Yes, I said. I recorded them on my phone. I gestured to Ms. Diaz, who presented another piece of evidence, a flash drive containing the recordings. The judge examined the flash drive, her expression growing more serious with each passing moment. I continued, my voice gaining strength. Then, something really strange happened. A week before the fire, a maintenance worker approached me. He seemed nervous, almost scared. He told me that Mr. Vasquez had instructed him to disable the building's main fire alarm system. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. My father's stony facade finally cracked, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Mr. Vasquez looked as though he might be sick. Did you get this maintenance worker's name? Judge Thompson asked. Yes, Your Honor, I answered. His name is Miguel Sanchez. He was afraid of losing his job, but he felt he had to do the right thing. He gave me a copy of the email exchange between him and Mr. Vasquez, instructing him to disable the alarm system. The judge looked down at the emails in her hand, then back at Mr. Vasquez. Mr. Vasquez, she said, her voice ice cold. Do you have anything to say about these allegations? Mr. Vasquez sputtered, Your Honor. This is a misunderstanding. I never a misunderstanding. I interjected, my voice rising with indignation. My apartment, my livelihood, everything I owe was destroyed in that fire. And you're calling it a misunderstanding? I turned to the jury, my eyes blazing. This wasn't an accident. This was negligence. This was a deliberate act of cost-cutting that put lives at risk. Mr. Vasquez knew about the faulty wiring, the gas leak, the malfunctioning alarm system, and he chose to do nothing. He chose to prioritize profit over safety. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure, and, I added, my voice dropping to a whisper, I believe my father knew about it too. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. My father's face was now a mask of fury. He glared at me, his eyes burning with rage. Order. Judge Thompson banged her gavel, restoring silence to the courtroom. She turned to Mr. Vasquez, her expression grim. Mr. Vasquez, she said, it appears you have some explaining to do. The judge looked over at the jury. Members of the jury, she continued, we will recess for the day. Please return tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. The gavel banged again. As the courtroom began to empty, I felt the hand on my shoulder. It was Julian. You did it. Audrey, he whispered, his eyes shining with pride. You did it. I managed a weak smile. The fire that sparked her success. The ultimate ironic twist of fate. It wasn't over yet. But for the first time since the fire, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, justice would finally be served. The gavel slammed down. All rise, the bailiff barked. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage. The courtroom, once a blur of anxious energy, now held its breath. Judge Thompson, a stern woman with eyes that missed nothing, adjusted her glasses and peered down at the papers in front of her. I squeezed Julian's hand, the warmth of his touch a small comfort in the frigid air. He gave me a reassuring smile. It's almost over, Audrey, he whispered over. The word echoed in my mind, a promise and a threat. For months, this courtroom had been my battleground, the fight for my father's estate, for my art, for my very future, had played out here, in this sterile space. The fire that sparked her success, the newspapers had called it, a sensational headline that glossed over the years of struggle and the deep wounds that had festered beneath the surface of our family. Was it an accident? Was it something more sinister? These were the questions that had haunted me, the questions that had driven me to seek the truth, Judge Thompson cleared her throat. In the matter of the estate of Charles Parker, she began, her voice resonating through the silent room. The court has reached a decision. My breath hached. This was it. The moment of truth. I glanced at my stepmother, Deborah, seated on the opposite side of the aisle. Her face was a mask of composure, but I could see the flicker of anxiety in her eyes. She played her part well. The grieving widow, the devoted caretaker. But I knew better. After reviewing the evidence presented, the judge continued, including the testimony of Miss Audrey Parker, Mr. Julian Thorne, and Mrs. Deborah Parker, as well as the forensic analysis of the fire and the recently discovered will. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. My stomach churned. The recently discovered will, the document that had changed everything. It had been tucked away in a fireproof safe in my father's study, a safe I'd discovered almost by accident while sorting through his belongings. The safe wasn't mentioned in the initial inventory of the estate, and I had a sinking feeling Deborah knew exactly why. This will, dated just weeks before the fire, superseded the previous one that left everything to Deborah. This will, my father's true last wishes, named me, his only daughter, as the sole heir. The court finds, Judge Thompson declared, her voice firm and clear, that the will dated March 12th is valid and supersedes all previous versions. A wave of relief washed over me, so intense it almost brought me to my knees. I heard a gasp from Deborah's side of the courtroom, a strangled sound of disbelief and fury. Julian squeezed my hand again, his eyes shining with pride. You did it, Audrey, he whispered. You won. But it wasn't just about the money, the house, the estate. It was about vindication. It was about proving that my father, despite his harsh words and his apparent favoritism towards Deborah, had ultimately recognized my worth. Furthermore, Judge Thompson continued, her gaze now fixed on Deborah. The court finds sufficient evidence to suggest that the fire that destroyed Mr. Parker's residence was not accidental. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Deborah's face paled. The judge raised her hand for silence. While the evidence is not conclusive enough to press criminal charges at this time, she said, her voice laced with warning, the investigation will remain open. Mrs. Parker, I advise you to seek legal counsel. Deborah's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and fear. I met her gaze, my own expression unwavering. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth was out. Later, as we left the courthouse, surrounded by reporters and flashing cameras, Julian wrapped his arm around me. I'm so proud of you, he said, his voice choked with emotion. You never gave up. I couldn't, I replied, looking up at him. Not after everything. I thought back to all the times my father had dismissed my art. The times he'd praised Deborah's practicality and mocked my dreams. I thought back to the fire, the devastating loss, and a strange sense of liberation I'd felt when I realized my paintings were safe. The gallery opening was a resounding success. My work, once relegated to the dusty corners of my apartment, now hung on pristine white walls, illuminated by spotlights, admired by critics and collectors. The fire that had threatened to destroy everything had, in a strange twist of fate, become the catalyst for my success. That night, as I stood in the gallery, surrounded by the vibrant colors of my paintings, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. My father wasn't there to see it, but in a way, I knew he was. The will, the truth about the fire, the success of my art, these were all pieces of his legacy, interwoven with my own. I raised a glass of champagne, a silent toast to the complicated, messy, and ultimately triumphant journey that had brought me here. The ultimate ironic twist of fate. It was over, and I had won.